Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Well, a lot of Ghanaians are looking forward to the IMF program. But is this going to come easy in terms of meeting first the preconditions before we can go to the board to get the program approved? But looking at all these conditions, the pre and even those that will come with the program, there are some people who are up in arms about the real impact of these conditions on the economy. Today, business institutions are arguing about the taxes that the government is trying to lay before Parliament for approval, which is one of those set of conditions that government should put in place. Are the concerns of these businesses justified, as well as the concerns about the impact of this program on the bigger economy? Well, today on PM Express, we assess these concerns and the conditionalities as government races against time to secure an IMF program. Well, I'll be engaging a tax lawyer and a tax consultant, Dr. Ali Nacha, an economist, Professor Ebo, and also a businessman. That is Seth. He's with the Chief Executive of the Ghana National Association of Chamber Industries to join me here in studio as we dissect and look at all these issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition. Be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. As we're still talking about the IMF program, and it looks like, and I'll be getting from my guest, it looks like it is clear that we are not going to get the program at the end of this month in terms of submitting our program request for the board to approve for us. And what we are hearing from the grapevine, if all other things being equal, we're looking at somewhere from the middle of May, that's when we're going to get our approval program for Ghana. But what are some of these preconditions that Ghana is supposed to meet? And I just want to run through, because there is talk about publishing the COVID report, which has been done. There's talk about also putting in place some tax revenue measures, which we understand it's been done as well. The utility tariffs as well, those things is being worked on as well. And there's also talk about rationalizing or publication of revenue that we get out of the extractive sector, and my producers will be putting that on the screen as well in terms of those preconditions that we are supposed to meet. So you look at secure a deal with domestic bondholders, secure a deal with the external creditors. We also talk about publishing the Auditor General's report on COVID-19 spending, review utility tariffs, and take that one very critical, because we're going to talk about conditionalities. Also, Get Fund, Road Fund, Disassemblies, Common Fund, reporting, provisional budget is being the enact legislation to achieve a 2023 fiscal target of primary balance at least 2%, memorandum of understanding on freezing financing. And there's also talk about taxes in terms of government says getting some taxes in place to aid the program from the board. And that is one thing that we're going to focus heavy today in terms of the concerns that are coming up in with respect to these preconditions. Are they justified or not, as we all race to get a board approval from the fund? And it's clear that the end of March is not going to come on. And that is why I'm engaging these distinguished guests. Macroeconomic Boaji is Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he's joining me here in the studio. Thank you so much for your time. I have our distinguished tax lawyer and lecturer, that is Dr. Ali Nacha on Zoom. I appreciate your time so much. And also Professor Ebo, economist par excellence, also joining us via Zoom for us to have a discussion on these conditionalities and whether they are justified. Well, let me first start with you. Today we're all expecting those taxes should be passed as part of a set of conditionalities. It wasn't done in Parliament. Happy? Excited?
Extremely happy, extremely excited. Because those taxes are anti-business. And I have no doubt in my mind that if it's passed, it's going to cause the collapse of a lot of businesses, and businesses are going to produce under capacity. If you look at the environment and already the taxes that we have, adding up, it was going to be harsh for businesses. So we are happy that it's not been passed. I hope that they will withdraw it and consult, engage the business people, find out the impact of the previous taxes on businesses and what possibly will be the impact of these taxes on businesses. In trying to get our revenue, we are creating problems that will be difficult for us to solve. We are killing businesses. It's going to cause unemployment. we are killing the micro, the basics for us to get all these macro policies to work. We are weakening it. So for me, we are happy it's not being passed. They should withdraw it, consult the business community. The chamber is ready to work with them. Get them convinced that these taxes, what extent are they going to impact on your businesses? Get their also input into the tax. In fact, for any tax to work, those who are going to pay the tax, largely the businesses and the people who are consuming the product, are supposed to be consulted. Get their input into it. Don't just put it in.
Was that not done?
That was not done. In fact, in our input to the budget, the 2023 budget, we made it clear that we are already suffering. There are a lot of taxes now. So we are not expecting that there will be an additional tax or an increment of existing taxes. So we made it clear. So we were not consulted. We just saw it in the budget, and they have.
Aren't businesses just averse to taxes? And I cite the example about even Apple, Facebook trying to relocate their headquarters in different zones just to minimize it. When businesses hear tax, they just want to find innovative ways to avoid them. And that is the situation.
Yes, tax avoidance is not criminal.
Yeah, but there's a moral argument, some would say.
Exactly. But let me say that businesses are not averse to paying taxes. In fact, apart from death, the only thing that you cannot run away from once you've been given birth to, or once you have set up a business, is taxes. We are aware that you have to pay taxes for government to do most of the things that the government is doing, construction of roads, building of schools, electricity, and other things.
Yeah.
So businesses are willing to pay taxes. But where the taxes are so-called nuisance taxes, where they are inimical to the development of businesses, then businesses will fight it. If the environment is okay and businesses are doing well, they themselves will even come up to say we are supporting government projects. If inflation is down, if there's stability in the foreign exchange market,
currency,
if the interest rates are also down, then businesses will do well. And then when you tax, the corporate tax alone in Ghana is 25%. So after all the profits I've made, if you take away my the revenue, if you take away my expenses, I get a bigger profit. You tax and you also get some. Now businesses are making losses and you want to tax. What they are doing with this is that there is profit before tax, which means that it becomes an expense to you. So they won't even wait for you to get to the corporate tax level, and then they do the 25%. So multiplicity of taxes are weakening businesses. Now, if you are importing, you are likely to pay 14 different levies and taxes. Which business will be happy with this when they are not able to make profit? Why should they be happy?
Let me bring in our tax expert, our tax lawyer, and also a tax consultant as well, Dr. Abdullahi Ali Nachia. Where are we getting it wrong with this whole taxes issue? And is it interesting that it appears that it is a precondition in getting a board approval from the IMF? Doc.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Boaji has said all that I wish to say, because where are we going? The question you asked, our problem is, one, we are not being certain with taxation. Taxation is about certainty, because the businessman would have to plan, would have to factor in all the taxes and its impact on his business. And like he rightly said, to get a tax to work successfully and give you the needed revenue, you need to have consultative processes in place. The people the tax is going to impact on, remember, the businesses are your agents who are going to collect the tax for you. And so if you don't engage them and take their inputs and know, they may tell you, well, we think that instead of bringing, let's say, this growth and stabilization levy of 5%, why don't you look at our 25%, wait till we make the profit, you increase it to 27. They could give you such a suggestion. So the consultative approach is very important. Then the other issue with our tax system, you were asking whether it was a conditionality. My senior Prof. Texin is here. I don't think that anybody will tell you bring in taxes before I give you a loan. If he tells you, I want to see how you are developing your fiscal space, has he told you to increase taxes? If your income is to meet expenditure, are there no expenditures that may be postponed or suspended to give you enough room to maneuver when things happen? You can continue. Indeed, most of the calls that are being made are not on cancellation entirely of some of the projects. People are even asking, can you suspend some of them that are not so immediate and present? And when things normalize, we come back to it. I don't think that is asking too much. As to finding fiscal space to run an economy, it's not about increasing, is that are we efficient and effective in the collection of the existing taxes? Because we have studies by Upoku and Tanaka in 2020 showing us what we call the tax gap, the difference between the actual taxes we collect and the potential we can collect. How have we closed that gap? Because the more taxes you introduce, the wider the gap would be if compliance is that low or non-existent. So I believe if we are able to mop up excessively what exists and we are not able to achieve, then we can start thinking about, is it that we don't have enough? We have more than enough taxes. The rates that we have are competitive in the sub-region. And so why are you increasing it? That has been my problem.
So, Prof,
with businesses.
So, Doc, for you, you think that, listen, these set of 3 key revenue measures is something that government should think twice about it in pushing it?
We need to think twice about it because let me give you an example. If you take the excise duty, for example, I keep saying that taxation is not all about revenue mobilization. Because if you look at the role of taxation in an economy, it plays so many roles. You can use taxation to develop businesses. You can use it to create jobs. And how do you do that? If you lower taxes on businesses, all things being equal, we expect that their retained earnings, they will expand and create jobs, take on more hands. If you tax them the more, my prof is here, he will tell you about the incidence of taxation. The businessman would either shift it forward or backwards. Shifting it forwards, depending on the demand for his goods, if the people will not complain about prices, he will increase prices and recover. So if you think you are targeting the businessman, like Mr. Boye said, is the customers. The backward shifting, if he can't push it forward, he cuts down the scale of production, so he has to lay off workers. Then he goes to increase unemployment. Factors of inputs, he has to reduce it. If he wants to make trouble, he can feed his family, he can move around, he's okay.
Doc,
and so it's unemployment that would suffer.
And I'll be coming to Prof very soon, but Doc, where are we getting it wrong when it comes to our whole tax administration and mobilization? Since secondary school, since university, there's been talk about widen the tax net, widen the tax net. Now, what we are also hearing is that, listen, you look at the size of the economy, and I'll come to Prof on that one. We are not mobilizing enough taxes to match the size of the economy.
Thank you. You see, when we say widening the tax net, we are looking at not there. How did they get out? You are granting incentives to certain sectors that they shouldn't pay tax. Is it time to ask them to come and help you contribute? If it is the 25 they cannot pay, can you introduce, you were exempt, can you bring in 5%? Let's all rebuild the country. Can you bring in 10%? That is one area. The second one is trying to look at what we refer to as illicit financial flows. That is complete non-disclosure. If you take the Ghana Integrity Initiative and Shraj report, it will tell you that Ghana is losing $3 billion annually from corruption. Corruption, $3 billion. Is that not exactly the amount we are looking for IMF? If you take ASEP report, it tells you we are losing $2 billion from illegal mining. If you add the two, we are at $5 billion. We've not come to under invoicing and other things at the port. So do you need IMF? We are talking about $5 billion a year now. and you are going to get 1 billion a year from IMF. So, and then you look at the situation of VAT. You and I'm sure you've gone to places to buy something or be in a hotel, you are checking out, they ask you whether you want VAT invoice or not. Yeah. Is it an option?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is what I'm talking about, the efficiency. Because Opoko and Tanaka's report is telling us that we have a corporate tax gap of 86% and VAT gap of 13.9%. Now, if you add these two, their percentage to GDP is close to 13%. If you add it to our current tax GDP ratio of 13.5, then it means we are around 26, 27% tax GDP ratio, above the 18% for the region. And that is why I'm saying, are we closing these loopholes and gaps? Because we are doing tax deepening. The existing taxpayers we know who are complying, if you increase taxes or you introduce taxes, the same segment of people continue to carry that burden. Because we have a paradox in the revenue mobilization sector in Ghana where we say 80-20 paradox. 80% of taxpayers bring in only 20% of revenue, and 20% of taxpayers bring in 80% of revenue. Who are these 20%? The multinationals, the banks, financial sector. These are the same people we've saddled with national reconstruction levy, we've saddled them with financial sector recovery levy, and now we are talking about growth and sustainability levy. The 80% we all keep saying, the informal sector is between 70 and 80%. What is their contribution to revenue? 20%. So if we are even able to nurture the 80% non-compliant to come up to 60, you can imagine the revenue we can make. And like I keep saying, we have the second schedule to the Income Tax Act 2015 Act 896, which has talked about modified taxation, presumptive tax for the informal sector. Since 2015, we are in 2023, that law has not been implemented. Because it brings up the idea that why can't we allow the informal sector to give, say, 2%, 3% of their turnover, like the growth and stabilization levy is saying, and that is your total tax for VAT and income tax. At least you are also contributing something. Then we could have opened the net, we would have widened the net. But as we are only deepening.
Interesting. Let me bring in Prof, the economist who's looking at the bigger macro issues. And you see some of these things and is now being presented to us as preconditions. And we've maybe spoken about what the program itself brings to the larger economy. Is it fair for those who would describe these things as harsh conditions? They could end up crippling the economy, affecting growth, or maybe a necessary evil that we need right now to help us get to the promised land.
Thank you, George. Good evening to my co-panelists, Dr. Ali and the gentleman from the
CEO, National
Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
George, I will not say they are harsh conditions because, you know, the IMF no longer gives conditionalities to countries. The staff level agreement is to sit down with you and ask you, we all know your problems. What are you going to do about it? And Dr. Ali said a few of them. We need to create a fiscal space. Now, one way to do that is to reform tax collection and other issues relative to how we mobilize our domestic tax revenue, but not necessarily introduce new taxes. So, for instance, Ghana is talking about digitalization. It's ongoing. How do we digitize the tax collection system to make it easy for taxpayers to comply with the payment of tax? How do we block the revenue leakages by making use of some of these platforms so that we can generate? One of the main conditions was that we're going to front load additional revenue measures to bring in more revenue. But I don't think that they asked us to introduce new taxes, right? So the issue about what we need to do to be able to get the IMF to come and support us is entirely left to us at our discretion to pursue them.
Okay.
It's the reforms that they will be looking at how we are able to come up with a credible fiscal consolidation effort to reduce our debt to levels that become sustainable so that we can use whatever space we create to look at the growth-enhancing sectors and invest in those sectors to expand the productive base of our economy. So they didn't tell us to introduce new taxes. We've mentioned over the years that, for instance, the extractive sector, the sort of arrangements that we have with these companies that come in, is it possible for us to call them back to the table to find ways in which we can ask them to make a contribution to our national development? The operationalization of the tax exemption law. Ghana should move beyond using tax incentives to attract investment. When you ask those who bring in FDI, they'll tell you that the list of the incentives is the tax incentives that we give them. They need a business environment that is conducive. So don't give them any tax exemptions. Give them a business environment that is conducive for them to come and produce here and tax them, they'll pay. So we should move beyond the introduction of new taxes. I mean, when the NPP was coming to power, they listed some nuisance taxes that they said they were going to take off. Why are they bringing back some of these taxes? So we can rake in more tax revenue without necessarily introducing new taxes that would hurt the private sector. And it's totally unnecessary.
And Prof, that's what I want to get a clarity from you. How do we get it done? Because I've heard this thing over the years. Widen the tax net, widen the tax net. We know those sectors in this economy that are not paying the taxes. We know how to introduce the measures.
People have spoken about the informal sector, but trust me, the informal sector will not give us any huge increases in our tax revenue.
What about the formal sector?
Yeah, the formal sector is the one they are putting all the governments are putting all their focus. And that's what Ali is telling you. They are taxing businesses, they are taxing formal sector workers, they are paying taxes, VAT. I mean, almost every time the focus is on this sector. But we need to also look at the leakages that leave the system. It's very important. And Ali mentioned the extent of corruption that takes place in this economy. How much of it goes out? We need to build systems in place to ensure that we keep to the barest minimum the leakages level and a revenue stream. And it's very, very important. Now, for instance, the number of government agencies, for instance, at the ports that are collecting revenue for government, can we reduce the number of them and still getting more of these revenue? Because you see, the more you put in place some of these institutions and these taxes, the easier it is for people to evade those taxes for convenience. So let the process be so straightforward so that taxpayers will comply easily so that it doesn't waste their time too. The third point that I need to make is that we need to ensure that there's enough public tax education. And also, we should show the public sector, the government machinery, to show to the average Ghanaian that we are making good use of your money to support the private sector to create jobs for your kids or for the young men and women of this country to get into jobs. When you do that and people see that the revenue that you get from the taxes are plowed back into the economy to help them, people will be willing to pay taxes.
I see.
Business will be willing to pay more taxes if, for instance, you discuss with them and increase their after-profit tax by a little bit. But when you begin to introduce some of these taxes that become input taxes, before you go and tax their profit, you are hurting them. You are trying to tell them that you are increasing their cost of production, when you should rather be reducing their cost of production for them to produce more, make more profits, and then you go and tax after they declare their profits. And that is what the businesses are complaining about. That is what we've called nuisance taxes in the past. And why they are coming back, I do not understand. Then the last bit is about this property tax. What are we doing about it? We've belabored this point so many times. What are we doing about it? I mean, you are home, somebody knocks on your gate, he gives you a small sheet of paper, it says this, your property rate. If you want to pay, call me on this summer, I'll come for the money. Really? I mean, in this day and age, shouldn't there be a platform that will make it possible, after the population census, the data we collected on houses, shouldn't it be possible to have an assessment of these properties? And for me to pay by more on a government platform to ensure that there are no leakages, because the money goes straight into the government kitty, and then we are able to generate more revenue. But to have this inhuman interface where people come to your gate, I'll issue a receipt, you are not even entirely sure if that money is going to go to government. So we need to increase revenue. Yes, there's no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean that we need to be introducing new taxes that are serving as a nuisance to productive activities in this country.
Prof, I'll be coming back to you to get your thought about the incidence of taxation and its impact on the economy. Some are saying that e-levy is a typical example for us, that it's not just about pushing these taxes, but also getting the right taxes as well. And Dr. Alina, I'll also be coming back to you to get your thoughts about how do we get businesses motivated to pay their taxes to the state? Because, listen, the e-levy has taught us that, listen, we will find a way around it to avoid the taxes. Let me come to you. I mean, hearing the thoughts of lawyer, tax consultant, are you saying that after all, we're justified with our claims? Or
of course,
we've had these eminent persons supporting your claims you're making?
Of course, they know the importance of the private sector to the economic development of Ghana. So definitely they are supporting our call, and they understand the effect of these taxes on businesses. For me, what is disturbing about these new taxes?
But government claims that there are no new taxes. For instance, the growth and stability.
Yes.
And I'll be coming to Prof and Dr. Help me. They are just expanding the scope. You are paying these taxes already.
And that is where the danger is. Those taxes are supposed to be temporary taxes to solve specific problems. When we
successive governments never take it away.
Reconstruction levy that started in 2001. It was supposed to last for about just 5 years. They added 2 years to it, and then they changed the name to the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy. It took a longer time, and now they have changed it, rebranded it, give it a new cloth and a new name, calling it Growth and Stabilization Levy.
Expanding the scope.
And then bringing in more business, expanding the scope. Now, the Growth and Stabilization Levy. Now, how are you expecting to grow when the private sector, which is the engine of growth, you are killing it? So how do you get a growth? Because the private sector is supposed to grow, so they'll be able to pay the taxes. People that they employ will also be able to pay the taxes. Now, with this, a lot of taxes, multiplicity of taxes, you are killing the private sector, which is supposed to generate the growth. That's
I was speaking to the Food and Beverage Association. I'll come to Prof and Doc on this then. And they were telling me that some businesses are looking at relocating to other countries, Ivory Coast, Togo, and all the rest. Strict proof, what is the current state of business of your members with respect to these taxes?
Yes, George, it's a very bad situation. And I'm going to give you a typical example, walk you through and give you an example, and I think you understand it very well when we complain about these taxes. Now, for instance, let me take the fruit juice, for instance. The excise duty was 0. Now it's 20%.
Processed fruit juice.
Yes.
You're trying to discourage people consuming sugary fruit juice.
So let's look at the effect of these taxes and whether it will discourage people from consuming.
Are your members folding up? Are they relocating?
Yes.
Is that the situation?
Exactly. Because you cannot survive under these circumstances.
What not mention the names of these businesses. Can you give us some numbers? I mean, what is the situation as we speak right now?
And that's what I'm explaining to you. You said I shouldn't mention names. So I'm giving you a typical...
No, as in the name of the businesses.
No,
I'm just saying that maybe 10, 5, and help you how bad is the situation.
Look, day in, day out, you get people coming to you and complaining. You get people coming and saying that we cannot survive under these circumstances. Just from last year to this year, if you take the numbers, no business will be able to survive. This business that you have increased the excise duty from 0 to 20%, is the same business that is being asked to pay the VAT, right? The same business that is going to pay the utility prices that has gone up. Water and electricity, and for beverages it went up so high that it's difficult for them to pay.
Are they shutting down?
Yes.
Are they shutting down?
You see, it is not so easy to get up and say
downsize their
businesses. Yes, some are definitely downsizing,
and some are moving to neighboring countries.
Exactly. It's not just easy to say get up and say I'm closing down. You have invested in the businesses, so now you are looking out for a way to survive over a period of time. If you have to reduce your production, you will do that.
And is that happening?
Is that happening?
And some are contemplating moving to neighboring countries as well.
Yes, even when you take this, those in the oil industry, the cooking oil, and all those things.
I know one company that is in the process of.
And you know, I was just reading, we are importing just for over the last 3 years, 1.17 billion of palm oil.
And do they want to put it squarely on the taxation issue, the business environment, or what are the reasons that they are telling you why they are downsizing, they are laying off, and some are looking at moving to neighboring countries?
George, it's a combination of factors. And the factors before these taxes were not so good. So you don't add up to the difficulties that they are going through. And I have enumerated some of these factors. So if you are going to add these taxes to it, what you are telling them is that we don't want you to survive.
Aren't you engaging government, or aren't you presenting the facts to them?
We have done that several times. And I think it's the intransigence of the government that is causing some of these things. Look, if they introduce this tax, lessons are there for them when it comes to the e-levy. Businesses will find a way to avoid the taxes. And the revenue, the 4 billion revenue that they are looking for, they will not get it. It will end up killing businesses. They should withdraw this tax, come to the table, have engagement with businesses. Let's find the best way forward. Otherwise, if they force and introduce it, we also teach them lessons.
What lessons are you going to teach them?
The lesson is that they will not get the revenue.
Interesting.
The lesson is that businesses are going to collapse. The lesson is that we are going to lay off people. And the lesson is that in the long run, the economy will suffer. Let's strengthen the private sector. That's what we are saying. Make a lot of profit and pay taxes, and the economy will move forward.
Prof, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, which one comes first, the egg or the chicken? In one breath, government claims that they need taxes to develop the economy. In one breath, these tax measures, they are leading to the collapse of businesses. And let me bring in, that is Dr. Ali Nachia. How do we get it right in terms of our taxation issue? Because it's clear that businesses are collapsing, but we keep on heaping more taxes. What is it about it that we are not getting it right? The data is there to show us.
You know, as we keep saying, the best way to mobilize revenue without increasing tax rates or bringing in new taxes is to ensure there is voluntary tax compliance. I remember the study that my dean, Professor Raymond Atuguba, did on tax culture in Ghana. You'll be surprised about his finding that Ghanaians love to pay taxes.
Oh, really? Interesting.
So you'll be shocked at this result. Yeah. Ghanaians love to pay taxes. And you know what he used as a proxy? When we go to church, we go to the mosque, we happily donate. Why? Because we know what the church will do for us. If you have wedding, they are there. You are bereaved, they are there to sympathize with you. Now the question is, how and what do we see? Prof mentioned it. Are you prudent in your expenditure? Are you able to curb corruption so that the taxpayer does not think, is that where my money is landing? If that is where it is landing, then I'll use it myself. And trying to get businesses to voluntarily comply with taxes, I keep saying that we need to categorize taxpayers into 3 areas if it comes to non-compliance. 1, there is the category they don't know the law and they don't know what to do. That category, you don't punish them. You educate them and guide them on what to do. If your first line is to punish them, they vanish, they go underground, you will never find them. The second category, they know the law, they don't know what to do. They need guidance. You don't need to teach them anything. And in that guidance, now you just caution them. The third category, they know the law, they know what to do, they won't just do it. These are the people the punitive measures of the law is meant for. Can you imagine you have a small business you are trying to grow, and you decide to call the revenue to come and go through your records and be sure you are doing the right thing? Meanwhile, you've been filing returns for 5 years. He comes and now he's imposing penalties on you for things you did not know and did not do. Now the question is, when I filed my returns in, let's say, 2015, if you had come in 2016 to audit me, would I have incurred interest all the way to 2023? So now you heap him with penalties and interest over and above his actual tax liability. So it was with that wisdom government came up with the Waiver of Penalties and Interest Act. Take advantage of this and I'll waive your penalties and interest. Come and confess. I will forgive you. You go and sin no more. But if I confess and now I become an enemy of the state, you are now spying me, praying I commit again and you get me, I will just not show up. So one, the education Prof mentioned, tax education is key. And I keep saying, I'm sure that Mr. Wiafe, you got to know about taxation when you receive your first salary and it was not up to what your employer promised you. Then you went and they told you, oh, they took tax. In other jurisdictions, South Africa, right from the primary, secondary school, university, you are taking a course in taxation. You should know how the government raises revenue and spends. Then you would be, but if your first interaction with the tax is to buy something and say, oh, there is VAT on it, then you start negotiating. Can't we do anything about it? Well, if you don't want the VAT receipt, I can give you another receipt. That would affect compliance. So we need, one, the tax education. Two, we need to guide them, help them. That is why the revenue has taxpayer service centers where people can be. You see, if you don't start treating the taxpayer as a client, but you treat him as a thief, you know what the thief does. He tries to also find out how to go about stealing and you won't get him, which is what Mr. Boaji is saying, that if it comes to tax avoidance, you say, well, it has moral issues. Morality is not a legal matter. Morality has to do
Coming
with
from the lawyer, I understand you.
Morality has to do with priesthood and what have you. So if I have any way under the law to pay minimum tax possible, that is what he's referring to. He's not saying he will evade tax. If I lay off workers and still maintain the production I am doing, all the profit comes to me, I pay my tax, I'm comfortable. Like Prof said, businesses don't look at the incentives. If you look at the indicators driving investment, there is no way taxation will fall about the seventh indicator. They are looking at the infrastructure, they are looking at access to market, they are looking at access to finance and credit, they are looking at the political climate, they are looking at the judicial system. When somebody defaults or somebody who swindles me, how fast can I get justice, get my money and continue business? You see all what I've mentioned, I've not mentioned tax yet. It tells you clearly that it's risk and returns. When the returns are good, you pay your taxes, you have more than enough to live on. And so that is, and the consultation. Remember, the telco chamber complained the same way that they heard of e-levy when the budget was read. And I keep wondering, why can't we go the way of South Africa? They have a standing tax committee. If government plans any taxes, like these three taxes, it would have been given to the committee, made up of people from business, academia, and all sectors. In fact, the current chairman, Justice Dennis Davis, is a Court of Appeal judge. They do the stakeholder engagement. They'll meet business sector, they'll meet taxpayers, then they can advise government, say, you see this e-levy, your 1.5 is too high. Our survey shows that 0.5 would give you more than even the 6 billion you are looking for. Look at the levy you are bringing, a growth and stabilization levy. Take the mining and petroleum sector. It is on their turnover, which is the same base on which they pay royalties. So tentatively, you are increasing royalties from 5% to 6%. Tell them that, engage them, and they will buy into it. But to spring it as bringing it through the back door is what creates the problem. Because remember, if I want to reduce my profit, I'll give you all my turnover. But if you can't even investigate my cost structure, what do you do?
Prof,
which is where we have challenges of transfer pricing. Unless you find it out, he goes away and you have very little to take from his income.
Prof, just quick 2 minutes before we take a break right now. Prof, I mean, it's been said that we need an IMF program badly, and these are the sets of conditions. How do we get around it? You've heard from the businesses. They are kicking against these taxes. Government is racing against time to make sure that they get a fund program, which we all know now that the end of March is not possible. What we are picking up is that all other things being equal from the middle of May. How should government get around this then? Maybe quick introductory comment, we go for a break and we come back, Prof.
George, they are asking us to streamline expenditure as well, right? Yeah. So it's not only about the revenue, and that is also supposed to be front-loaded. So it means that kindly we should be streamlining our expenditure. But I've not heard anything that is being said. Now, if you look at one way in which you can raise more revenue to create that space is to reduce your expenditure, because it's revenue minus the expense. Yeah. So you take away, reduce the negative, and even leave your revenues there. You see that you get surplus to do a lot of things. It is expenditure rationalization and streamlining that is key. That is why the political economy issues are, and that is why the government, no government will want to go there, because there are serious political economy issues there. If it is revenue, there are political economy issues there, because the opposition will say, no, we are not going to allow you to take taxes, we are hurting the Ghanaians, they won't allow you. When is expenditure rationalization, the party in power will not want to do it because they need to be involved in what is called fiscal populism, to spend, to get a populist to vote for them, and so on and so forth. So there are political economy issues, and that is why Ghana is where it is. I expected that one of the things that we should be discussing now is on our expenditure line items. Which of them can we do something about?
Okay.
Do we have state-owned enterprises that we can win off government payroll for them to be able to run on their own revenue? And possibly even declare profit for government to getting more revenue.
Prof, let me just quick one. We need to do a quick break and we'll be right back. Prof, this is PM Express Business Edition. This is PM Express Business Edition as we look at the IMF program and the conditionalities we are supposed to meet before we go to the board, and whether they are too harsh. The complaints that are coming from businesses and some economists and civil society groups, they are justified or not. One thing that has become very topical today is the set of 3 key revenue measures that government is trying to push through Parliament, and today they couldn't take a decision on that. It appears that they're still finding a way around it. So let me wrap up with my guest on Zoom, and I come back in studio. And Prof, you were making a point about the way forward, and I'm just saying that we are racing against time. That is what we are being made to believe. You know, how do we get around the situation? Businesses are saying that they don't want these 3 taxes. Government is saying that we need it to move forward. What should be the way forward, Prof?
The way forward, we've said some of them. I think that there are ways in which government can raise more revenue. But most importantly, without introducing new taxes, that would be a nuisance to business and private sector. But also the expenditure management is also very key. I mean, if you look at the fact that as at the end of 2021-22, the 3 items, the compensation, debt service, and statutory funds were over close to 140% of our revenue. It means that there is nothing left for capital expenditure, which is a key investment, public investment that we need to expand the productive base of our economy. So how do we get to solve this problem? And at the center of the IMF reforms, and whatever conditionalities that you are talking about, is for us to be able to bring down these 3 levels, apart from the statutory funds. The compensation and then the debt service are key to the reforms that we are going to be going through. And so the question is that, can we take a look at those enterprises or institutions that depend on government for compensation to be paid? Can they, for instance, public universities, would the government allow them, put away the political economy issues, for them to charge even 50% of what they will need to run the universities, and possibly use part of the money, if it's possible, to pay for compensation of lecturers and other staff on campus, so that if the government will provide only the infrastructure needs that they have, the universities can run on their own. So that you win the universities of government payroll, and this annual tax strike and all of that, you get rid of it. And then look at some of these state-owned enterprises. I mean, we now know BOSS is doing very well. Can other state-owned enterprises take a cue for what BOSS has done in the last few years to also do same, so that if they can, the government begins to win them off? These are our expenditure management issues that we can put on the table and be discussing.
Okay.
Can we reduce the size of government? Yes, we can. We need to have a conversation about the size of parliament. Yes, we need to reduce the size of parliament because we have too many members of parliament. We can have a smaller size of parliament. And also, do we need to always have a voters register open in an election year? These are some of the expenditures that we don't want to discuss. But they are part of the reason why we are where we are.
Let me bring in Doc. I mean, Doc, Doc Ali, your final thoughts on this issue, please.
Yeah, my final thoughts will be to add to what Prof mentioned, apart from the expenditure and all that. My key issue has to do with corruption. We cannot run away from it. We have been reading of all the reports that come. You know, some of our appointees that now you look at their assets, you will be surprised that it's a gold mine. How can they live that way if we don't have money? That's why I'm saying that Ghana is not poor. We are only broke. And we are broke. We are not poor. We are only being poorly managed. Because with all the resources, come to think of it, during COVID period, these are the periods the GRA exceeded its targets. Have you observed that? Yeah. They exceeded targets 2020, 2021, 2022. And that is what Prof mentioned, automation. Once you automate, the tendency to be able to hide any income or misapply revenue can be sought. It can curb a little bit of the corruption. So we cut the size of government expenditure. We try to deal with corruption to save ourselves the money going down the drain. We try to educate people, we automate. And then I am sure that once we try to close the tax gap, all those who are required to pay. Then, of course, we don't need to go borrowing. Are we not saying we want to be beyond aid?
Yeah.
Beyond aid is just like the Mr. Wajib mentioned, giving the tax a new name and bringing back. Ghana Beyond Aid is no different from the previous government's homegrown policies. Is that not the same thing? We want policies we have designed ourselves to deal with our problems. It's the same.
Prof, 30 seconds, your final thought, 30 seconds.
Come again?
30 seconds, Prof, your final thoughts.
Okay.
When we talk about corruption, we don't need to really look at political office holders. Like we are saying, the revenue leakages, there's a lot of corruption that goes on there. We need to make sure that we pay those who collect our taxes well, give them a less disincentive, and punish those who are caught for evading taxes and leaking revenues out of the revenue stream. When we begin to deter such behavior, people will easily comply with tax payments. Those who collect the revenue will make sure the revenue. And of course, let us make sure we actualize the Vice President's vision of digitalizing Ghana by sending that to revenue collection so that we reduce the human interface, the collection of taxes, so that leakages would cease. Yes.
Mr. Baji, your final thoughts and the way forward. It appears that the yentia is coming from businesses, as you said.
In fact, they should not ignore the concern of businesses. Now that it's not passed, they should come to the table for us to discuss it and look at the way forward. We are not against the payment of taxes. We are against taxes that will kill and cripple businesses. We are ready to support Ghana to come out of this problem, to bring the macroeconomic stability that we need. And for me, it's important for us as businesses that we have inflation coming down, we have policy rate coming down, we have interest rate coming down. That will help us. That is what they should be more concerned, to create the conducive environment for businesses, rather than heaping taxes day in, day out. That will kill businesses.
Another debate will still go on in your homes. Has been PM Express. Immense thanks to our tax lawyer and consultant, Dr. Ali Abdul-Achia, and also Professor Ibu Texan, an economist as well. Distinguished gentlemen, I thank you for your time and I appreciate it so much. And also, our NCO get set. Thank you so much for your time. I know the debate will still go on in your homes, your offices, about the real impact of these conditionalities on your business, on your firm, even on the larger economy as well. It's been PM Express Business Edition.